Good afternoon, everyone. I believe you can see the slide. Is it visible to you? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, it is visible.
Respond, otherwise I cannot find out. No. Okay. Okay. We took up the issue of indicators of sustainability. Basically, we talked about economic indicators for monitoring sustainability, as we discussed yesterday. In fact, we try to distinguish between weak and strong sustainability. In case of weak sustainability, we talked about the totality of the resources or capital, which should remain intact or which should not diminish. But of course, in the case of strong sustainability, we believe that each of these capital units or maybe different types of capital will be important. So, kind of all different types of capital which are considered to be complementary to each other should not diminish as such, or maybe the stock of this capital should be maintained over a period of time. So if it can be maintained, we can say that it actually follows strong sustainability rule. Or otherwise, if we can have a stock of all the all the capital, so maintained over a period of time without thinking about distribution of this capital, so probably we can talk about okay, maintaining or maybe following the weak sustainability rules. So after that, we came with the concept of this economic indicators of sustainability. In fact, in the case of economic indicators of sustainability, normally, because it's a development issue, obviously national income can be one important parameter of monitoring sustainability. But the conventional approach of national income accounting, so that is not so useful because of the fact that these national income indicators do not take into account the impact the process of growth and development might be having on the health of or maybe state of environmental quality. So it doesn't take into account the depreciation of the natural capital or natural resources. Rather, it talks about it definitely talks about the depreciation in the man-made capital, but the other forms of capital which are also depreciated, so these are not taken into account while going for estimation of national income through the conventional method. So there is a need to have some kind of adjustment in the system of national accounting. That is done by adjusting for depreciation and depreciation in the natural resources, and also the kind of adverse impact that this entire process might be having on the health of the environment. So environmental damage should be subtracted, and also the depletion of natural resources, how much it gets reduced. So these things are to be taken into account in from the net domestic product. So we can have green NNP or green NDP, whatever it might be. So where we take into account these two things. So after taking this into account, we can get this green national income or green NDP or green NNP, which is also known as environmentally adjusted national income. We also have the concept of genuine savings, wherein again this depreciation in the natural resources is taken into account for separately for uh, renewable resources and non-renewable resources both. And also we have a different kind of environmental economic accounting system, which is known as System of Environmental and Economic Accounting, so SEA. So that also can be taken up. But as of now, we may not be concentrating on that much, on that too much. So regarding this adjustment in the national income accounting, so I'm just trying to share another file with you. Give me a minute. This is a handwritten note Now, if we take into account this green, if we have to consider this green thing, basically we have to take into account the depreciation in the natural resources. So if we take that into account, we can get green net national product. So already a large literature has emerged on the issue whether the macroeconomic measure of GNP that we often talk about can be transformed to produce an indicator of sustainable development. In fact, Esteem talked about this in an article in 2003. So as I pointed out, this measure of gross national product or gross domestic product has been traditionally considered to be a welfare measure and a measure of national income. But the fact is that it doesn't take into account the depreciation in the form of natural resources, probably, so that may not be taking into account the environmental cost that has been actually uh, inflicted on the society. So that's why. So there is an attempt to take into account this environmental cost over here. Now, many a time it is asked why it is necessary to adjust the conventional national accounts. Uh, so it is believed that these accounts may omit many inputs uh, which the environment provides to the economy. Because in most of the environmental goods and services, we know that the markets are not available, or there are not enough markets to take care of the services provided by the environment. We know about that. In case of the system of national accounting, the work carried out by the housewives, so that is never reflected. So that way, in fact, national income estimation is kind of underestimated. The same thing might happen in the case of environmental goods and services. So if this adjustment is not done to the national system of national accounts, then probably this value will be again underestimated. So these inputs which the environment provides to the economy, so these are to be incorporated. By making the adjustment, actually these things can be taken care of. So when a country depletes its natural capital, this depreciation of its stock of resources is ignored in the national accounts, even though depreciation of its of the man-made capital is allowed for. So if we calculate the green net national product, so it will involve correcting for these omissions. Okay, so that is one most important thing out there. Now you see, ad hoc deductions can be made. So these ad hoc deductions might be in the form of depreciations in natural capital stocks to allow for development impacts, for example, in the form of deforestation. Because whenever development takes place, there will be a lot of impact on the society, on the environment. Deforestation might be one. Groundwater depletion might happen. Soil erosion might happen. So those things are there which are not normally taken into account in the system of uh, national accounting. So by making some adjustment into the system of national accounts for national income, so these things are taken into consideration. Now for that, so for understanding this, so actually, so there is a kind of formula or maybe kind of procedure how it is taken care of. So you can look into this question number one, which is derived for a particular economy, where it is assumed that there is a representative agent who derives utility from consumption of both produced goods and environmental amenities. So we tried to see it in the first unit when we talked about the interlinkages between the economy and the environment. Because any economic agent means basically we are talking about some person in the society. So we try to you see. So when you talk about net national product or whatever that may be, actually this net national product will be coming from the individual income. In a sense, we can say so. So for that, actually, to know about the individual income, so we try to actually find out how a representative agent behaves under certain circumstances. So a consumer or a representative economic agent will always try to maximize his satisfaction, so which can be represented in the form of a utility function. And this utility function might be depending on the kind of goods and services which might be produced, and maybe also by having a kind of enjoyment out of the natural resources. So we have two different kinds of goods and services. One is the produced goods, and the other one is the environmental amenities or assets. So this is represented by a vector Ct, where T represents the time period. Now, production of goods and services is determined by aggregate capital stock. So the stock, normal capital stock we talk about, which is actually represented by a vector K, and technological progress, because ultimately technology is involved in the process of production. There is a change in the technology, so that can help in producing more amount of goods and services. Obviously, the production will be dependent upon this. Okay, natural resources will obviously be there, so we might be considering this to be part of the capital stock itself. So technological progress will also depend upon time. So with time, technological changes might happen. So more sophisticated technologies might be emerging, which might replace the old technologies. So these things happen out there. So an economy is deemed to be sustainable at time t if utility of the person, we have defined utility like that, no? So as the satisfaction of an economic agent. So an economy is deemed to be sustainable at time t if utility is less than or equal to the maximum sustainable utility at that time. We try to define that way. Ut is either equivalent to um or utm, whatever that may be, or less than the maximum sustainable utility. So the concept of sustainability we try to define to be consistent with non-declining values of the utility function. Okay, so it's consistent with non-declining values of utility, which is a function of the C factor, which is nothing but produced goods and environmental amenities. So the economy will try to, because we are talking about the kind of sustainability, so it's a kind of intergenerational equity kind of a thing. Over a period of time, we have to take into account how it changes. So that is why, so when we talk about the maximization of utility, so that takes into account the time factor. So the economy maximizes the present value of utility over infinite time horizon at a constant discount rate, and that discount rate is given as rho. So since we are taking into account the time variable, then obviously we have to find out the income benefits or maybe the cost evaluated at the present period. So for that, present value will be required, and when we talk about present value, a discount rate has to be assumed. Here the discount rate is assumed to be rho. So in that case, the value means objective function is something like this: maximization of the utility function, which is a function of this C vector, and also the discounted means discount is given in the form of maybe e to the power minus rho t. So we try to kind of integrate this utility function over a period of time. That period of time is infinity in essence. It starts from 0 to infinity, so with reference to time. So equation number 1 actually tells us about the maximization value or the objective of the economy in terms of maximizing the utility of all the people in essence, you can say, or maybe of the same person over a period of time, and that is reflected in, that is shown by equation number 1. Now there are some studies which have shown that for this economy to be sustainable, the green net national product, GNNP, which is given as YT. So YT is defined as PT into CT plus VT into K dot T. So this green net national product should be non-declining at time t. So the value should be either greater than or equal to 0. If it is less than or equal to 0, it might be unsustainable. Okay. So in this case, when you talk about PT, CTs, we have already come to know about that. This is a vector of goods and services in essence, coming from either the production, produced goods and services, or maybe environmental amenities. The P is the relative price for consumption goods and environmental amenities. Because C talks about the amount, P talks about the price. So basically, it's the total cost involved in the process of consuming this consumption goods and the environmental amenities. Then K is the rate of change in capital stock. K is the capital stock. K dot is the rate of change in capital stock. And V is price for each element of the capital stock. Because in the capital stock, there might be different forms of capital. Okay, so it might be man-made capital, it might be environmental capital, whatever that may be. The overall cost in that process is given here. So in essence, what we can find is that this income level will be just equivalent to the zero. In that case, the utility of the representative economic agent at time period t will be greater than the maximum sustainable utility at time t. So in that case, if we are talking about G and NP is declining, if it is declining at time t, then utility must exceed the maximum sustainable yield. So basically, that says that it will be unsustainable. It will not be a sustainable thing. Just a minute, yeah. So this is how this concept of GNNP is normally used. The green net national product is being computed, and this is how it will tell us whether the things are sustainable or not, whether it follows sustainability rule or not. The another concept that we talked about is an alternative economic indicator of sustainable development, which is closely related to green net national product, is the genuine savings. We had already seen that one, genuine savings. This was actually put forward originally by Pearce and Atkinson in 1993, and later on it was actually developed by Hamilton in 1996. So this genuine savings compares investment in an economy with depreciation of all forms of capital. So it's not necessarily the man-made capital or produced means of production, but also the natural capital, which might depreciate over a period of time. As such, we can say that it's an empirical application of the opportunities approach to sustainability. And in fact, it involves a comparison of investments and depreciation in total capital. So probably it can also be termed as the net investment. So this is the genuine savings is defined like this. DS is equal to V into K dot, where K is already capital stock. The change in the capital stock. And we have come to know the price for each element of the capital stock. So that tells you about genuine savings, which can further be written as K dot plus K dot F plus PR minus FR into S dot. So it is given by the net change in produced capital K. K dot is net change in the produced capital K, plus the change in foreign capital, which is given as KF, plus the value of depreciation of natural resource stock, which is given by the physical change. Physical change is given as PR minus FR multiplied by 10 times the hoteling rent. So this is a kind of rent actually, so which was proposed by Harold Hoteling. So that's why this is known as hoteling rent. It's a price basically of the change in the capital stock, in essence, natural capital stock. So what will be the cost over there? So that will actually tell us. Now, if it is given like this, the test of unsustainable development is we have to see whether GS is negative or not. If GS is negative, that basically means that this utility at time period T will be greater than the maximum sustainable utility at that time period. So UT will be greater than UMT. Now, if GST is okay, general savings is positive, of course, it will pass the test of weak sustainability. Of course, in essence, GNNP and GS both are actually indicators of weak sustainability, not of strong sustainability. Of course, we can include changes in the stock of human capital also. So in the equation, which is not done here, of course, in that case, spending on education and training would be a positive term here. So, but that is not done here. If GS is negative, so this is clearly an indication of unsustainable behavior. The GST, if it is negative, no less than 0, this will be unsustainable. If it is unsustainable, then obviously you have to try to improve the value of GS. So how it can be done? The investment in the aggregate capital stock may have to be increased. Otherwise, the value will remain low. So this increased investment might be in the form of pollution treatment. It might be in fisheries and forest stocks, searching for new economically viable or non-renewable resource deposit. It might include increased investment in schools, hospitals, railways. So many other things are there. Because, so if we have to go for sustainability, then obviously the GS value should be positive. And if GS value has to be positive, then obviously investment has to be increased. And this investment might be in the form of man-made in man-made capital, or maybe in kind of natural capital as well. So ultimately, the objective will be to go for higher investment in different capital inputs, and probably by doing that, we might be achieving the kind of fulfilling the weak sustainability law insofar as this kind of sustainable development is concerned. So that is the option over here. So we'll not be taking up the strong sustainability indicators as of now, but mostly so these are the most common indicators which are being used for understanding the concept of sustainable development. In the next phase, we'll be trying to find out a few other indicators which are associated with the concept of sustainability. I'll try to find out so how this development is associated with the concept of poverty, and how certain economic issues with international trade and development are associated. So those things we'll try to have a look at. But in general, when you talk about issues for sustainable development, basically the issue is that growth or development. Normally we say development, but actually mostly we talk about income growth or economic development in a sense. Now this economic growth is obviously needed because so once growth happens, the income or maybe surplus generation is possible, and the increased income level or maybe surplus can be spent on different other activities, maybe in the form of social sector development, in the form of health and maybe education. All those things might happen out there. So obviously growth is desirable, growth should be achieved, but the question is whether the growth can be attained or not. Needed growth can be attained or not. It's a very difficult question actually. So it depends on the economic policies of the government concerned, the kind of constraints the economies might be facing. Based on that, we have to find out a solution or answer to the question whether the needed growth can be attained or not. There might be a lot of kind of random events which might be disrupting the process of growth of the economies. Policies will play a very important role over here. Market forces, whether means people have to decide whether it's the market forced or market based economic growth, or maybe whether it is a guided economic growth by way of actually intervention in the market. So those things are there. So policies can come up with the clear agenda or maybe clear planning regarding the growth part of the economy is concerned. Now, obviously, whenever growth is there, economic activities, more economic activities are happening. So higher or more the economic activities, more will be the impact or maybe stress on the environmental resources. So we may have to use more of environmental resources to generate more energy. We may have to use more of raw materials to produce our desired items. Okay, so all those things will be happening out there. So urbanization and population growth will actually result in kind of more use of natural resources, and obviously that will have some kind of impact on the quality of the environment. Two things will be there. the quantum of natural resources will be affected because non-renewable resources, as we know, the quantum or maybe the stock is limited. So we may not be in a position to use it for kind of infinite period of time. That may not be possible out there. So obviously, people have realized that people have gone for kind of use of kind of non-conventional energy sources nowadays. Okay, renewable resources are being used. It's increasingly being used, but even then, this is not sufficiently available or sufficiently used by the community. But overall, we find that the quantum and quality of the environment will get a hit. More the industrial production, more will be waste disposal, more will be waste generated, and this waste generation and waste disposal will have an externality effect on the society at large. Basically, we mean to say that environment will get a hit out of this. So quality as well as quantum of the resources, environmental resources, will be affected adversely. So if we have to make it a green growth, then probably one issue might be to think about sustainable growth or sustainable development, in which case probably we have to think about restricting ourselves to some extent. Okay, kind of indiscriminate use of the natural resources might have to be reduced. Rather, we have to focus on balanced growth by way of okay, incorporating or maybe taking into account the impact the environmental resources might be having. So we need to take into account okay, the losses or maybe the cost which are actually inflicted on the environmental resources by taking that into account. So the indicators, as has been pointed out, in the form of maybe genuine savings or maybe green net national product can be taken into account to see whether the national income that we are estimating are actually taking into account this cost which is inflicted onto the society or maybe to the environment at large. When we take that into account, when we take the cost inflicted onto the environment is taken into account, then obviously the national income values will be kind of will be smaller compared to what we could see when it didn't take into account the cost in the form of maybe damages to the environment or maybe kind of depreciation in the natural capital is not taken into account. Okay, so ensuring sustainable development is not a very easy task because our requirements will always be multiplying. So obviously, we have to meet the requirements, but at the same time, probably we can go for kind of better methods of production in which impact on the society, impact on the environment can be reduced, and we can relatively use better methods for having cleaner or greener output. So that probably is one issue. Technological intervention might be important. But the fact is that, as we have seen, this negative externalities on the environment will always be there, in the society will always be there. So with higher growth or higher economic activities, obviously, so there will be some impact on the environment. That is unavoidable. But what we can try to do is to minimize this impact on the society or maybe to the environment. For that, probably we can go for better methods of production, better technology. Okay, it's not so easy, but even then we have to strive for achieving the sustainable development goals of the economy. Okay. So next is to think about the issues of poverty and environmental degradation. So many a time we try to establish a link between these two because we try to see the commonable resources. We studied the concept of tragedy of commons. All those things we tried, and in fact we found that in many of these natural resources, the pressure of the population is very high, particularly in case of developing countries. In developing countries, many poor people have to rely on the natural resources, the forest, the kind of wetlands. So all those things are sources of livelihood for many poor people over there. So all over the world, poor people usually live near dirty factories or maybe waste dumps or other degraded locations. So these places, normally the better of people, so they choose to avoid these places. So as a result of these, the poor people almost always bear the brunt of environmental degradation. So most of the people who die from air or water pollution every year, so it's a significant number actually. So these are mostly from poor economic conditions. Normally, this poverty and environmental degradation, so these two things are often caught in a mutually reinforcing downward spiral. As we know that the poor people are more critically dependent on common resources. It might be forest, it might be water resources. Okay, so water bodies and so many other things for their day-to-day living, compared to the others who will be having some kind of private wealth. Basically, so that is the difference between poor people and rich people. Rich people have a lot of assets, whereas poor people do not have the assets. So that's why they will not be getting any income out of the assets. So they have to work and they have to get wages to earn something for themselves. So that is the difference. So in the case of poor people, so they have to be more critically dependent on the common environmental resources compared to those who will be having some kind of assets on their own. Uh, so with rising population and in the absence of other resources to fall back on at difficult times, the poor people have to exploit these natural resources more extensively than before. It's because they do not have any other assets, so they have to rely on the environmental resources, natural resources, common pool resources. So, so in the absence of any other assets or resources to fall back on at difficult times, and when they have increased the population, the demand for okay, okay, more demand will be there. So to meet those increased demand again, the dependence on the environmental resources will be more and more. So this will put further pressure on the environment, the forest resources, for example, water bodies, for example. So they will be put to severe pressure out there. So, so environmental degradation takes place. Now, this environmental degradation in turn makes their living conditions even more precarious. So they will be forced to squeeze the already degraded environmental resources because they depend adequate. So poverty is also to be adequately addressed, and this is another important issue if the spiral has to be arrested. So that arresting this downward spiral between poverty and environmental degradation, that will not be possible only with purely environment oriented policy of the states. So that they should also take into account the policies for poverty eradication. Now, for appropriate policy formulation, it's important to examine the causality between poverty and environmental degradation. Uh, Addressing poverty supported by a program of environmental restoration should be adequate if the downward spiral is triggered off by poverty. So if not, obviously, uh, addressing poverty will not be sufficient over there. But the fact is that there are certain other facts which we need to take into account. When you talk about poor people, the poor people are not the ones who will be having the means and the power to damage the environment the way it can be damaged by the richer section of the society. Because the poor people will not be having that much of resources. So they will depend on the forest resources, no doubt. For example, if they have to depend on the forest resources, they will not be having the resources to cut down a huge lot of plants out there and sell them in the market. It's not actually. They'll be trying to collect their day-to-day requirements out of the forest. And their specs will be very high. And they will try to see that the forest is preserved so that their daily requirements can be met by that. So that way, in fact, we can believe that the poor normally do not have or possess the means and power to damage the environment to the point that will unleash this downward spiral between poverty and environmental degradation. Whereas there are ample evidences to show that the greed and rent seeking by the rich and powerful section are responsible uh, for the degradation of the environment and common resources in a scale that endanger the livelihood of the commons dependent and poor, pushing them degrade the very resources on which they are critically dependent. So therefore, a policy which will be mostly addressing the issue of poverty, so that will not be sufficient. So they can have only some temporary impact. So more permanent solution will require correcting the market and institutional failures that allowed plundering of environmental resources. So the poor people may not be in a position to degrade the resources to that extent, uh, in which actually, so by which actually the environmental resource gets degraded totally. So it might be the rich and the powerful section of the society who might be engaged in that process. So obviously, so it's not only the issue of poverty, but also the problem of market and institutional failure, which might actually result in this type of issues. So that is why the policies which might try to tackle the issue of poverty only will not be sufficient over here. So there are other issues which are also to be taken into consideration for looking into this type of problems or maybe mitigating this type of problems. There are other issues also, so which we can have a look into. Some global environmental issues are there. We often talk about, you see, so pollution, for example, if we talk about, you see, so it's a public bad, these public bads are actually non-rival and non-excludable things. Pollution is a public bad. So if it is created so that will have a negative impact on everybody equally. So in essence, it will be non-rival in nature. Similarly, once it happens or once pollution is being generated, so nobody can be excluded from the effect of the pollution. So that way, in fact, it's a kind of public bad. It's just opposite to the public goods. And this pollution is not a local issue, although it might be locally generated. But if it becomes bigger one, so that might impact the overall society equally. So that way, in fact, we need to look into these global environmental issues, and there are certain economic aspects of these global environmental issues which we can have a look into. So one of the issues in this global environmental or maybe economic aspects of global environmental issues is related with the trade and development. In fact, trade and environment is one issue actually. So, of course, so there will be they can be broadly divided into two categories. One is the set of issues which arise from the consequences of differences in environmental regulations across different countries. We know it very well that there are different countries in the world who will be following different types of standard insofar as environmental quality is concerned. Okay, so some of the richest countries, so they are more concerned with the environmental quality, and they have actually implemented better standards for environmental quality. Whereas there are some other sets of countries which have actually given more emphasis on economic growth and development at the cost of environmental quality. So they will be having relatively lower standards insofar as environmental quality is concerned. So that is one category of issue. The another category of issue is in the form of management of global public bad, which is known as the pollution. We'll try to have a look into that. And so far as trade and environment is concerned, you know that trade happens between different countries of the world, depending upon certain specific issues. Of course, we know it very well that international trade helps a country to specialize in the production of those commodities in which it has comparatively a lower cost. In essence, we can say that it's comparative cost advantage compared to other countries and import those commodities from others in which it has a comparative cost disadvantage. We know it very well. Nowadays, if you go to US and want to purchase a kind of t-shirt, probably you will end up, you will not be in a position to buy a t-shirt which is manufactured in US or maybe UK or maybe in other developed countries. Okay, so these t-shirts and other commodities, okay, so might be whatever is available in those markets, so might be produced in many developing countries like China, India, Bangladesh, Vietnam, like that. So why does it happen so? Because the US probably or maybe UK or maybe other developed countries might be gaining by importing those products from these developing countries, because the cost of production of those products will be much lower in these developing countries compared to producing it in maybe US, UK, or maybe other developed countries. So these developing countries will be having a comparative cost advantage, and that is why, so they will be specializing in production of these goods and services. Compared to that, there might be other commodities, so where the developed countries might be having their comparative cost advantage. So they will try to specialize in production of those goods and services where they have the comparative cost advantage, and try to import those commodities which might be produced by others and where they do not have the comparative cost advantage. Okay, so that is the theory of comparative cost advantage of international trade. There are many factors which actually play a role in deciding on what kind of commodities will be produced by different countries. Because if you want to produce, for example, steel, so the required raw materials might have to be available there. For example, you might have to have iron ore and other things which will be very important from the point of view of production of steel. So that way, in fact, required raw materials might be one important determinants of deciding on the pattern and basically pattern of production in those countries concerned. The number of things might be there. One might be the relative endowment of different types of natural resources, so which will play an important role in determining the pattern and volume of the trade. Okay, at the same time, the pattern and volume of trade through changes in the spatial distribution of production and consumption affects the environment nationally and globally. You see, so one thing is that the relative endowment of natural resources that will determine the pattern and volume of trade. If iron ore is more abundantly available in India, so they might specialize in production of steel, and they will actually decide on exporting of steel. So this trade pattern and volume of trade, how much they will trade, so that volume and the pattern, so what commodities they will be trading, so those things will be dependent upon relative abundance of natural resources for production of these goods and services. But at the same time, this pattern and volume of trade will also affect the environment nationally and globally. Okay, so that will happen because of the fact that you see the production will obviously be having some kind of negative externality to the environment, depending upon what kind of industries are being set up in particular locality. The environment in the local or maybe the global setting will be affected. So this issue assumes greater significance, particularly in the context of the move towards liberalization and globalization by almost all the countries. Nowadays, you know that international trade is facilitated by almost all the countries. The trade barrier has come down considerably because of globalization. The movement of goods and services, factors of production, capital, so all those things has become much easier nowadays. Okay. So, as suggested by the standard theories, there are two sources of international trade determining the comparative cost advantage of different countries. So these are mostly the differences in labor productivity, and second one is the relative availability of factors of production, including natural resources. So if labor is more productive, then obviously, so that will help in producing more of these commodities. So accordingly, a kind of production centers for these commodities might develop out there. At the same time, if the resources are locally available, the cost of actually acquiring these resources might be relatively less. That will also help in having a kind of effective, cost-effective kind of production of those commodities. That is another thing over there. But apart from these two sources, the differential environmental standards or regulations across countries may also affect the pattern and spatial distribution of trade. Then obviously there is a cost involved in the process compared to those where the environmental regulations will be more relaxed. Now, those where stringent regulations are in place, the cost of production will be high. Probably those countries will not be in a position to compete efficiently with other countries. So where the standard of environmental quality or maybe restriction or regulation might be relatively more relaxed. International trade facilitates greater production and consumption. Mm, so ultimately, so this will lead to different types of environmental problems. So it might be in the form of social cost actually. The problems, there are different types of problems might be there. Loss of forest might be there. Biodiversity loss might be there. Pollution of water, air. So those things might be there. So these are in a sense kind of external cost or maybe societal cost. The society has to bear this cost. But the fact is that there is a kind of issue of market failure. We know about that these negative externalities are not properly captured by the market prices. So these remain uncovered in the cost calculation of the individual producer. So in such cases, the negative externalities, uh, in such cases of negative externalities, private cost underestimate the social cost, and therefore the price is lower than the cost that the society bears as a whole. So the products are underpriced because the social cost or external cost is not taken into account. So overall societal cost is higher, whereas the individual cost is much lower. Okay, so price is lower. That also means that the demand for the product will be relatively higher. So if higher demand is there, then obviously production or maybe supply of the product has to be relatively more. So in that case, so this is not happening at the socially optimal level of production. Okay, so that is another issue. More output is produced than the socially optimal level. So in that case, there should be appropriate regulation to curtail output. We talked about this taxation policies of the government. So if there is a kind of external cost coming out of the production of goods and services, probably the producers have to be made to pay for that by way of paying taxes to the government. Okay, so for negative externalities being generated out there. Okay, so these appropriate regulations may prove useful to make the polluters curtail output to the socially optimal level when they are compelled to bear the cost of such pollution. So for that, proper environmental regulation might be required. Otherwise, it may not be possible over there. We can discuss these things with the help of certain example. See, so we may consider two countries, one developed and the other developing. Normally, in the developed countries, the environmental regulations are generally stricter, but compared to the developing countries. So these two countries may be considered to be identical with respect to factor endowments, prices of factors, and technology, except for the differences in their environmental regulations. So in the developed countries, what will happen? The stringent regulations will force the producer to set the prices at the level of social cost, because they have to bear the external cost of production as well. Okay, so in that case, they have to set the prices at the socially optimal level, or in essence, you can say that that price will reflect the social cost. On the other hand, so in the developing countries, this type of stricter regulations will be absent. So in the absence of such environmental regulations in the developing countries will enable their producers to sell the products at a low price. So this price may be equivalent to the private cost rather than the social cost, because they do not have to take into account the external cost. So that is actually going to the society at large. Okay. So thus, the developing countries appear to enjoy a comparative advantage, though although it may not be a genuine comparative advantage. So basically, this tells us about the issues of pollution heaven hypothesis. Now, this pollution heaven hypothesis is basically telling us that the developing countries, which may not be having a kind of stringent environmental regulation, might be ending up having factories which are actually mostly generating pollution, right? So developed countries will be forced to go for producing and exporting those commodities and use those methods of production which are less polluting in nature. Otherwise, they will have to bear the cost done to the environment because of stringent environmental regulation in those countries. But in the developing countries, things are quite different. Due to the apparent comparative advantage, the developing countries would specialize and export the environmentally intensive goods, which are more polluting in nature. Although it's not the kind of natural comparative advantage, it's a kind of apparent comparative advantage. It's not a genuine one, but even then, so since the environmental regulations are different, then obviously they do not have to undertake the cost of undertake the social cost or maybe external cost. So that is the advantage for them. So based on that, they will be forced. They will be actually specializing in production of those goods which are actually environmentally more intensive in a sense, or they are more polluting. So second thing is that so these countries are not in a position to produce less polluting goods because so this will require investment in clean technology, and these countries are not in a position to do that or go for this clean technology because there is a cost involved in this process. So if this is the reality, then international trade between the developed and developing countries will turn the developing countries into pollution havens where all the dirty industries or heavily polluting industries would get concentrated. So that is what is known as pollution haven hypothesis. Basically, this is the hypothesis where we assume that because of less stringent pollution or environmental standards in the developing countries, so these countries end up being the center of polluting industries. So there are not many empirical evidences in support of this pollution haven hypothesis. Of course, there are certain explanations given for that. The cost of relocation of an industry is quite high. So that is why, although, so of course, some industries might be set up somewhere, so relocating them might be very high. So that's why it may not be relocated to the developing countries. Um, so this might actually outweigh the advantage of less stringent environmental regulation. An industry which might be located in developed country, so if they want to take advantage of this less stricter environmental regulation in the developing countries, they have to relocate to the developing countries. But there is a cost in relocating these industries. Now, if the industries find it to be relatively high, because you see, so this cost, if it is high, then obviously people or maybe industries will not be interested to relocate themselves to the developing countries. So that is one of the reasons, which is why it may not happen as such. So pollution haven hypothesis may not have lot of empirical support or evidences, but even then, theoretically, this is it is possible to think of such a situation. Okay, let me stop here for today. There is another small thing which I can take up hardly 5 minutes. It will take. Let me finish it off. Then after that, maybe in the next class, we'll go for some other issues. So we talk about global public goods and bads. Now we know about public goods, so which are actually non-rival and non-excludable in nature. And non-rivalry, we know. So what non-excludability is, that is also known. So similarly, in case of public bads affect all the people in a locality adversely, and no one can be excluded from this means from the effect of this public bad. So the public goods or bads may be local, may be global. So for example, if we talk about ozone layer might be an example of global public good. The good effects of ozone layer is not exclusive to any country, irrespective of whether the country has or has not taken steps to conserve it. Similarly, if we talk about global public good, we can talk about greenhouse gas, since no country can exclude itself from the adverse effect of greenhouse gas. You see, as we have pointed out, this public goods or public bads both are non-excludable. Because of the nature of non-excludability, global public goods and bads because of this non-excludable feature of the global public goods or public bads, countries on their own may not have enough incentives to take necessary measures for conserving the goods and limiting the bads. Okay. So maybe a country might try to free ride on other countries, hoping that the other countries will take necessary actions. That is normally the case in the case of public goods. That might happen in international scenarios also. So India might think that, okay, all other countries will be taking appropriate actions, so that's why that will be sufficient. I should not contribute anything for that. Okay, so there might be a tendency to free ride. So, but the fact is that if each and every country thinks in line, then there will be a situation of tragedy of commons. Okay, so enough actions will not be taken, and ultimately it will be tragedy of commons situation for every country. So that is why there is a need to have cooperation amongst countries around the globe for taking proper actions for this type of global public bads. And this realization of the need for such cooperation, so that is the foundation for discussions and negotiations of different international protocols. We know about Kyoto Protocol, Montreal Protocol, etc., on global environmental issues. So these things are the results of the realization of the countries that for controlling global public bads, cooperation among different countries is necessary, and that is why this type of kind of protocols have we have come across this type of protocols. Although these are not very successful, but there are efforts, even Paris Agreement and other international meets or maybe discussions we have seen. But basically, these are efforts to take into account the sufficient actions by each and every country to tackle the global environmental problems. And in fact, that is very important. Although we may not be successful, or maybe the countries are not successful, but the fact is that this initiative itself is important, and that will help overcoming the problems of this public bads, global public bads. Okay, if you have something to share or ask, you are most welcome. Otherwise, I can conclude here.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
So when you will be sharing the quiz for marks?
You'll get it soon. Don't worry.
Okay.
All the marks will be available to you. Just give me a little bit of time, right?
Okay. Thank you, sir.